Hello everyone, we are talking about the pharyngeal apparatus and now we'll deal with the pharyngeal components. In this section, we'll deal with pharyngeal pouches that lie outside of the pharyngeal arches. Then we'll talk about the pharyngeal clefts. Pharyngeal clefts are the spaces that lie towards the inside of the pharyngeal arches. And finally, we'll see what the cervical sinus is and what is the role of pharyngeal membranes in the human adults. So this is a diagram, this is a table actually that summarizes the adult components of various pharyngeal arches. It's a very important table, though it looks a little bit difficult. That is because it slightly is. You have to memorize it, and the memorizing of it is slightly difficult. But if you concentrate on various components and how I divided the components in the previous sections, then you'll easily get through this table. Now let's go through the table together. First of all, we have these pharyngeal arches. So first pharyngeal arch has a mandibular and a maxillary component. So nerves that are supplying the first pharyngeal arch are the maxillary and the mandibular branches of the first cranial of the trigeminal nerve, which is the fifth cranial nerve. Chorda tympani also supplies the this arch. Now the muscles involved here are the muscles of mastication. So it gives rise to the muscles of mastication, which include the temporalis muscle, the masseter muscle, the medial and the lateral pterygoids. Then we have the mylohyoid, the anterior belly of digastric, the tensor villi palatini and tensor tympani. These are the muscles that are given off by this arch. In the skeletal component, we have premaxilla, then maxilla, then the zygomatic bone, then part of the temporal bone. It forms the Meckel's cartilage, the mandible, the malleus, and incus. And the ligaments that are formed by this arch are the anterior ligament of the malleus and the sphenomandibular ligament. We have talked about it, talked about all of these components separately in detail. Now, the second arch is supplied by the facial nerve. It gives off the muscles of facial expression, which include buccinator, auricularis, occipitofrontalis, platysma, orbicularis oris, and orbicularis oculi. Now, it also supplies the posterior digastric and stylohyoid and stapedius muscles. The skeletal components given off from the second pharyngeal arch includes the stapes, the styloid process, the lesser cornu and body of the hyoid bone, the upper part of the body of the hyoid bone. And the only ligament formed by the second pharyngeal arch is the stylohyoid ligament. Now we have the third aortic arch. The nerve of third aortic arch is glossopharyngeal nerve. It supplies the stylopharyngeus muscle, and the skeletal component given off by this arch is the greater cornu and the lower part of the body of the hyoid bone. Finally, we have the fourth and sixth arches. The nerves that are supplying the fourth and sixth arches are branches of vagus nerve. Fourth is supplied by superior laryngeal, and the sixth arch is supplied by the recurrent laryngeal nerve. The muscles that are given off by this pharyngeal arch are cricothyroid, the levator palati, and the constrictors of pharynx and the intrinsic muscles of the larynx. The skeletal components that are given off are the laryngeal cartilages, which include the thyroid cartilage, the cricoid cartilage, the arytenoid cartilage, the corniculate cartilage, and the cuneiform cartilage, the 5 important cartilages. So this is all about this table, the intimidating table that you have to memorize so that you know what this lecture was all about. It actually summarizes the entire thing. I've gone through the details of all of these segments separately, so try to understand them, try to memorize them. That would be very helpful in your exams as well as your viva. Moving on, let's deal with the pharyngeal pouches. So the pharyngeal pouches lie towards the outside. The first pharyngeal pouch is between the first and second arch. The second pharyngeal pouch is between second and third. Third is between third and fourth. And this is finally the fourth pharyngeal pouch between fourth and sixth. So first pharyngeal arch gives rise to the muscles of mastication. It has maxillary artery and trigeminal nerve. The second pharyngeal arch forms the hyoid. It forms the muscles of facial expression. It has stapedial and hyoidal arteries and the facial nerve. The third pharyngeal arch it also helps in the formation of hyoid bone. It forms pharyngeal musculature. The artery is internal carotid and the nerve is glossopharyngeal. The fourth pharyngeal pouch helps in the formation of larynx, pharyngeal and laryngeal musculature. It is supplied by the vagus nerve, the superior laryngeal branch of the vagus nerve. So moving on, let's see what are the adult derivatives of the first pharyngeal pouch. The first pharyngeal pouch actually lies between the first and the second pharyngeal arch. So this is the region we are talking about. So it elongates to form a diverticulum, which is known as the tubotympanic recess. So it elongates to form a diverticulum, which is known as tubotympanic recess. Now the distal part, this is the distal part of the tubotympanic recess. It forms the middle ear cavity, the tympanium, and the mastoid antrum. So two components are formed from it, the middle ear cavity, which is known as the tympanium, and the mastoid antrum. Now, the proximal tubular part of the tubotympanic recess forms the pharyngotympanic or the eustachian tube. So this is the tubular part. This tubular part is responsible for the formation of eustachian tube in the human adults. It forms a communication between the nasopharynx and the tympanic cavity. So this acts as a communication between the nasopharynx and the tympanic cavity in adults. Now the second pharyngeal pouch will actually rise between the second and the third pharyngeal arches. Let's see what are the adult derivatives of the second pharyngeal pouch. So endoderm of the second pharyngeal pouch, it proliferates to form number of tiny solid cells, solid buds that extend into the underlying mesoderm. So these are the cells that are being formed. These are small cells that are being formed, that they are extending into the underlying mesoderm. Now the central core of these cells, they break down and they form the tonsillar crypts. So these cells, the central core of these cells now break down and helps in the formation of tonsillar crypts. Now the second pouch is mostly obliterated by the developing palatine tonsil. So palatine tonsil is being developed in this area, as a result of which most of the components of the second pouch are obliterated. An adult part of this pouch remains as intratonsillar cleft. So the only part that remains in adult is the intratonsillar cleft. Now we're talking about the third pharyngeal pouch. Third pharyngeal pouch lies between the third and fourth pharyngeal arches. Now it differentiates into a dorsal bulbar part and a ventral tubular part. So this is a dorsal bulbar part and this is a ventral tubular part. So we'll see what happens to both of these parts. The dorsal bulbar part proliferates to form the parathyroid 3 or the inferior parathyroid gland. So this dorsal bulbar part it proliferates to form the parathyroid 3 or the inferior parathyroid gland. Now the endoderm of the ventral part. So this was the ventral part. The endoderm of the ventral part of the third pouch, it forms thymus. So thymus is this is where the thymus originates from. So the developing thymus and the parathyroid glands, later on they lose their connection with the pharynx. So in adults they lose their connection with the pharynx and come to lie in their adult positions. Now the fourth pharyngeal pouch, it lies between fourth and fifth arch. Now, fourth pharyngeal pouch, let's see what are the adult derivatives of fourth pharyngeal pouch. It also differentiates into a dorsal part and a ventral tubular part. The endoderm of the dorsal bulbar part, it proliferates to form the superior parathyroid gland, which is also known as the parathyroid 4. So the endoderm of the dorsal bulbar part, this part, the endoderm, it forms a superior thyroid or parathyroid 4. Now let's talk about the parathyroids. The inferior parathyroid is being produced by the third pharyngeal pouch. The superior parathyroid is being produced by fourth pharyngeal pouch, as you can see in the figure. So inferior initially lies above or cranially, and the superior parathyroid initially lies caudally. Now the parathyroid 3 develops from the third pharyngeal pouch. It migrates caudally along with the thymus. So when we talked about it, we said that thymus and the developing parathyroid gland, they lose their connection with the pharyngeal wall. This is what happens. They tend to migrate caudally. The thymus tends to migrate caudally, along with it the parathyroid gland goes, as a result of which its position is lower than the parathyroid 4, that is superior parathyroid gland in the which develops from the fourth pharyngeal pouch. Now let's talk about the pharyngeal clefts. Pharyngeal clefts, they lie towards the inside of the pharyngeal arches. They're invaginations of the surface ectoderm between the pharyngeal arches. So these are invaginations of ectoderm which lie between the pharyngeal arches. Now the pharyngeal wall in these regions of cleft is very thin and consists of only a trilaminar disc. That is, the outer wall is ectoderm, the inner wall is endoderm, and in between the ectoderm and endoderm there's a layer of mesoderm. So the only pharyngeal cleft that gives rise to an adult structure is the external auditory meatus. So the first pharyngeal cleft is the only pharyngeal cleft that gives rise to an adult structure, and this adult structure is the external auditory meatus. So moving on, let's talk about the cervical sinus. So mesenchyme of the, now refer to this figure please. The mesenchyme of the second here, pharyngeal arch, it rapidly grows downward. So the mesenchyme of the second pharyngeal arch is rapidly growing downward. Now it overlaps the mesenchyme of the third and the fourth pharyngeal clefts. Here you can see it is overlapping the mesenchyme of the second pharyngeal arch. It is growing downwards and overlapping the pharyngeal it is overlapping the third and the fourth pharyngeal clefts. Now it fuses with the epicardial ridge. This is the epicardial ridge. It finally comes to fuse with the epicardial ridge. Hence, it fuses with the epicardial ridge. Here you can see, and a cervical sinus is formed in between. Here you can see this is an open area that comes to comes to be due to the rapid development of mesenchyme of the second arch as it proliferates past the third and fourth cleft to fuse with the epicardial ridge. Now second, third and fourth pharyngeal clefts get buried under the surface. It forms a slit-like cavity. Here you can see in the figure that is lined by ectoderm. This slit-like cavity is known as the cervical sinus. Cervical sinus soon disappears with the development of neck. It has no adult remnants. So, recapping what happened in this section, we talked about the derivatives of pharyngeal clefts and pharyngeal membrane. So, first of all, let's deal with the clefts. The first cleft is the only cleft that gives rise to an adult structure. The adult structure is the external auditory meatus, which is lined by outer ectodermal layer of the tympanic membrane. The second, third, and fourth cleft, they obliterate and disappear. Now, similarly, the first pharyngeal membrane is the only membrane that gives rise to an adult structure. It gives rise to the tympanic membrane. The second, third, and fourth pharyngeal membranes, they disappear and they obliterate. So this was all about this section. I hope you found it interesting. For further sections, keep watching sqadia.com.